Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Kalicube Tuesdays. Today it's with Brian Harnish. Absolutely delighted to have you here, Brian. Welcome.
Thank you, Jason, for having me.
Brilliant. A quick hello, and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Brian Harnish.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. Yeah, we're going to be talking about SEO audits now and into the future. We talked about SEO audits a couple of weeks ago about Olga, and this is going to be more about agency level, making sure that you can process this, making sure that you've got a process you can scale and stand out from the crowds with the SEO audit reports, and also what the process is. We'll go all through that in a minute. We always start off with the brand SERP, which I absolutely love. And here we have your knowledge panel. Brian Harnish, author, lovely knowledge panel. How delightful. Have you been working on getting that, or was that potluck?
Oh, yes, they actually got the accurate picture this time. Fantastic.
Brilliant. So you've been working on it, you're tracking it, and that's a really, really nice kind of start. You'll be able to claim it, or I don't know if you've claimed it yet, or you're going to claim it.
I haven't claimed it yet.
And we're going to move on. We've lost Brian now. There's a slight connection problem, but I was looking at the images, which really struck me, is there are actually quite a lot of Brian Harnishes, and I hadn't realized.
Yes.
And in Google Images, we see with those filter pills, the range of topics that it associates with your name, none of which, in fact, are SEO.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, and I kind of think I was talking to Alessia Korobka, and she's really into the kind of the images and the image analysis of entities and so on and so forth. And the fact that it doesn't recognize you specifically might mean that you might want to do a wider image strategy or start thinking about the image strategy to get those entities from your images into Google.
Definitely. I do need to post more images. So
there you go. So once again, from a brand SERP, we've got a really quick and simple insight into something that's missing in somebody's strategy. And my quick guess off your brand SERP wasn't wrong. The image strategy needs a little bit of work. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about SEO audits. And let's start. What is your process, or do you not have a process and you change it for every client?
Really, it is something that does have to kind of change from client to client, because an SEO audit isn't a templated approach, but there are certain things that can be done to ensure that you really work on scaling and efficiency, right? So like, for example, if you have an agency where you have several SEO auditors on staff, you might have a process where you will lay out how to examine exactly why a site's ranking has dropped. So you would probably want to have a process where first you call the site for technical errors, then you examine Google Search Console, Google Analytics for specific keyword drops, things like that. And one thing I don't always see in SEO audits from other people is keyword targeting or keyword analysis, like getting granular in the keyword statistics, because something can be very keyword, shall we say, keyword targeted, right? So things like if you have a specific drop in traffic, it could be because a particular keyword is not showing up for certain featured snippets anymore, and it was doing that for several months beforehand. But in addition, it could also be that the way people searching has actually changed, and so it's really having a feel for your audience and what they are doing at that particular moment in time. And that can really only be done through more granular analysis on a more consistent basis.
No, 100%. There's also the possibility that the SERP has changed. I had a client who suddenly they were ranking in lots of different towns for a specific keyword. Suddenly a map pack appeared and they were pushed right down the SERP, and the click-through rate dropped. And we didn't understand why until we figured out that Google had fundamentally changed the SERP.
Exactly. And now just recently it's coming out that Google is reducing people also ask.
Right. Okay.
And so if someone had been going after that as part of their specific strategy and all of a sudden it dropped, maybe a reason why that dropped.
Are you saying, sorry, I missed this piece of news because I haven't been paying attention. Has people also asked dropped in presence, dropped in number?
Yeah, it's what happened is that Dr. Marie Haynes had posted this fairly recently, like yesterday, I believe. She was talking about people also asked having a much lower presence in the SERPs all of a sudden.
Right. Okay. Which might or might not be temporary, but at least, and that is a problem. Is a client comes to you and they says, "Oh, we've got a sudden immense drop in impressions." Notably in this particular case, we're really worried. We actually had a client who were ranking for the term login, and they ranked number 9, and then all of a sudden they ranked number 12, and all of a sudden the number of impressions dropped because the searches for login are multi-million a month. And they freaked out, and I had to explain to them it's actually just the word login, and it's useless.
Oh, Jason, the sponsor.
Oh, the sponsors. Yes, thank you very much. Before we carry on the conversation, the sponsors join me every week on Kalicube Tuesdays. I love this show because I get so much immense insights from so many wonderful people, including today, Brian. It's always produced in partnership with Wordlift, who have an AI-powered SEO tool that does the heavy lifting for you, And today we have the headline sponsor, ahrefs, absolutely wonderful platform with everything you need to rank higher and get more traffic. Thank you for that reminder, Brian. I did ask you before, if I forget, please remind me.
Absolutely, always happy to help.
Yeah, when we don't have Anton, who isn't here today, I need the guests to help me run the show. So back to the strategies and the processes for an SEO audit. We were talking about the idea of being able to scale it. You were saying each case is different. You need to research granularly. How can you possibly build a process that scales?
Yeah, I kind of broached that a little bit earlier. So, like, for example, you could create a process that doesn't necessarily focus on client-specific type SEO tasks, right? So, real estate client would have something that is extremely different than an e-commerce client. So you wouldn't necessarily always have like a real estate client has specific things that you would want to check, like their IDX plugins and stuff like that may not be working or functioning particularly well. Things of that nature. Then you would have on an e-commerce site, it would be a little bit different, maybe because e-commerce is about selling products. Right? What if they have all sorts of duplicate product descriptions that everybody else is writing about? That kind of thing you don't necessarily want to bake into your audit process because that's really getting a little too much in the weeds. So if you have to get a little bit broader with that audit process. So sticking to things like perform a crawl to see exactly what's happening with the site. Then check Google Search Console. Then check Google Analytics for specific types of keyword drops. Then check SEMrush for certain things like user intent changes with their new user intent tracking that they have right now. And there are other things as well. Some clients may be pretty heavy on producing content, and with SEMrush, you can use the content topic analyzer in order to come up with more topic ideas that would be more fruitful for them versus another client that may not be so content heavy.
But with an SEO audit, though, I often find that clients immediately say, I want to create new content. I want to do something new. And it's the glory of the new that attracts them. Do you not find that most of the time you're saying, well, first of all, let's do a spring clean?
Yes, there's definitely some spring cleaning that would be, I would say, conducive to some industries more so than others. For example, news websites, while they may have content that's 2 or 3 years old, you don't want to delete that content. You don't want to prune that content. Maybe archive it or something. Because if you delete that content and go, even though that you may not be getting search traffic from it, that doesn't mean it's not valuable to increasing your overall authority. Now, if something doesn't match the overall topic targeting that is going on the site, then perhaps that's something that you might have to work with in order to figure out exactly, hey, maybe this is not something that is going to be exactly right. Maybe we need to get rid of it. But actually removing content based just on search traffic is a mistake.
Right. You should remove content if it isn't topically relevant. And that must come up a lot in these audits, is sites that or companies that have created loads of content to try to hit all these sweet super keywords that are really sexy for them because there's lots of volume, and they've gone off topic, and that's a massive problem.
Yes, exactly, and it is a problem with certain types of sites. So, if you have an attorney site, for example, and you are going through and producing content on the particular topic areas, and all of a sudden you have certain content that target other topics that may not exactly be in line with the topics on that site, that's something that you may want to get rid of. But in terms of, say, like a real estate site, for example, pet, if you have a pet article on a real estate site that's not exactly about pets inside the home or how it relates to having a home overall, then that's something that would need, not necessarily you would want to get rid of, but maybe you want to tweak to be more in line with real estate.
Right. Yeah, there needs to be that connection. And in answer to the question we just saw on screen, yes, this is live. So any questions you have, you can pop them in
this is live.
In the chat. Anton's actually now turned up, so we now have the support. He turned up just too late to remind me to talk about the sponsors, Wordlift and ahrefs, but thanks to Anton, they get a second mention halfway through the show. And yeah, from the perspective of kind of pruning, you're saying rather than prune, let's adapt. So let's move the content closer to our core topic, because pruning is quite a what's the word? A drastic approach. It's something we used to do quite commonly, but today with authority and expertise, as long as it's on topic, it's still valuable, even though it doesn't bring in traffic, which is what John Mueller talks about, and also you're talking about Dr. Marie Haynes, same thing.
Yep, exactly. And that's why just blindly going after any kind of content just because it doesn't have any traffic is a mistake, simply because it adds, especially if it adds to the overall quality of the site, it adds to its authority, it adds to its trustworthiness and expertise, then you want to keep it. Otherwise, if it's total junk content, it can go away.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about topical authority with Georgios a few weeks ago. So even that trafficless content brings topical authority if it's on the nose in terms of what you're actually doing for your audience, the offers you have for them. And I'm interested now, you started talking about EAT, which isn't directly in the audit, but do you, during your audits now, look at the idea of EAT and audit that or not?
In general, I like to take a glance at the current entity landscape just to see exactly what they're ranking for now, just to see exactly what my overall goal is, to see what the actual site is ranking for right now and what is currently bringing in traffic. If they're not ranking for anything that would be considered an entity, that would be a weakness that would need to be addressed.
Oh, right. Okay, that's an interesting idea and approach.
So,
and
I know that like it's, when it comes to specifically looking at what's actually bringing in the actual traffic, I do like to go into SEMrush just to see the overall what is actually happening in that case, because it could be the client had never even considered entities or anything. Like I run across clients that would say, if it's a recipe site, for example, it would be like how to bake certain types of chicken, for example, that the ranking #1 for, that's bringing in 5,000 searches a month or something like that. So it really depends. If something like that might be considered an entity in the term in when it comes to recipes, but not to other types of sites.
Right. So you've got to be careful about the type of site. And from your perspective, are you going to prioritize the volume of traffic they're likely to get, or are you going to prioritize the topicality for the long term?
It really depends on where the site is at right now. If it's already covering a lot of the topics, then what I might end up doing is seeing, because with it, very few sites are covering everything, right? So it's always a good idea to really take that big picture approach, see everything that they're ranking for now, take a look and see what SEMrush comes up with in their content topics section of their tool, and see where the weaknesses are. You also want to do a content gap analysis to see what other competitors are doing versus your site, so that you can figure out exactly what is needed to really close that content gap between those competitors.
Right. Okay. And you were saying, kind of from your perspective for the scaling, you've got these templates. What are the tricks to actually make the templates handoffable to somebody else within an agency?
That is, there are, yeah. So I talked about the broader approach before, right? The broader approach is key because you have to be able to rely on the expertise of your staff. If you can't rely on the expertise of your staff, maybe it's not a position that they should be in anyway, you know?
Okay.
But if with a broader list of tasks that you can hand off to somebody else, that is really the most efficient way to scale an agency. So, for example, if you're an agency that just does only attorney sites, you can create something that is a little more specific to that particular type of client. But if you're an agency that deals with sites that are more of maybe you have 3 or 4 different types of clients, then you can create the SEO audit template in such a way that has a section that has attributes that are specific to each type of site. And if that doesn't apply to the site that you're currently working on, then the SEO auditor can just go ahead and take that out of the equation of what they're considering for that audit.
I really like what you just said is you need to rely on the intelligence and good judgment of the people you're working with. And if you're simply handing off tasks, then there isn't very much point. And that comes back to what Mad Singers was saying last year, is one thing that a lot of us end up trying to do is creating duplicates of ourselves. And by doing so, it's actually, although you can scale because it's processed, you don't create duplicates of yourselves. And because of the SEO process is always very specific to a specific client, you're going to run into trouble. And you need to have staff in whom you have confidence in terms of their good judgments and their intelligence.
Exactly. And it's really not enough to really like I know that really as a business owner, some business owners want to have similar copies of themselves, but you have to have everybody has different strengths and weaknesses, and those should be taken into account. And really where, like, if you have somebody that is stronger in real estate sites than e-commerce, you may want to just strictly put them on e-commerce sites. Well, I'm sorry, real estate sites as opposed to e-commerce. And that kind of thing had to be taken into account too.
Yeah, I mean, so as an agency boss, you need to be intelligent about using the skills and intelligence of your staff. I mean, with my company in Mauritius and now with Kalicube, what I'm trying to do is look at the person and say, where are your strengths? How can we fit a job in order to play to your strengths as best we can, while still obviously serving the client?
Exactly.
Brilliant, wonderful. So we agree, which is lovely. And then you were talking about making your reports stand out. Now, one thing I know about reports is I've seen a lot of them, because you get clients and they say, "Oh, we got this report from the last SEO," and they pull it out of their drawer and they've never looked at it. They've never done anything about it. And one of the reasons, that sort of 2 things I'm asking is, 1, how do you make it stand out from the crowd? And 2, how do you get them to actually do this stuff? And I would imagine part of it is making it stand out from the crowd, because a boring, flat report doesn't get anybody excited and get them working on the stuff.
Right. One of the things that's really common among many agencies is that you get a laundry list of items in an SEO audit report without any context.
Right.
And they don't expand on the context in where, for example, if you have a situation where you have link anchor text that is out of alignment with the targeted internal link anchor text of the overall site, then just saying improve link anchor text is not going to do anything. What you have to do is you want to say something to the effect of that is relevant to that specific site. So improve link anchor text from this to this while doing this will be something that is much better than just saying improve link anchor text.
Right. Yeah. And that is the thing is context, as you say, and we forget about context. And there are a couple of problems, one of which is in SEO, we think everybody understands improve anchor text. Your client might not even know what anchor text is, let alone how to improve it. And the other is when we're looking at something in so much detail, we forget that the person reading it hasn't actually looked at all this stuff. So we have to explain everything.
And that is true. And that you have to kind of generally take a step back sometimes and realize, hey, maybe this person had no idea what I'm talking about. Maybe I need to explain each item individually in the context of how we arrived at that, as opposed to saying just improve this, then this, then this. Because that's kind of the lazy way out. And also the other thing, design, colors, all that of the template and all that kind of thing is really something that should be really looked at professionally if you really want to win over clients and really provide your 100% absolute best presentation possible.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Would you advise somebody to get a graphic designer in?
Yes, if their capabilities are not graphic design rather than a wall of text, work on strategically separating the text with graphics that support exactly what you're trying to do and things like that, rather than just a wall of text. Most people are not going to read a 200-page report, but they will read bulleted lists of items that they do need to actually improve the actual website, and it's much easier and efficient for them to go through.
Right. Yeah, and we're looking for action points. I mean, you if you say to somebody, improve this or make the anchor text better, or in our case with Kalicube Pro, I actually just got a report and it said address is wrong. And my comment on that was you actually have to tell them what to do. You have to say address is wrong, go in and correct it. And they're going, but that's obvious. And you're going, it's obvious to you, but it's not obvious to them because they haven't looked at the page.
Yes, exactly. And another perfect example, like include schema on the page. Okay, what are they going to say? What schema? What schema? Provide the actual example of the actual code within the audit and say, hey, copy and paste this into your schema section of that tool and just make sure that it rendered and validates properly, and here's how to validate it.
Right. So, I mean, in this SEO audit, would you give them the schema markup they needed? Or would you say, well, this is an extra service. You need schema markup. This is basically what you need. Here's the schema type you want to put onto this page, but that's an extra service.
It depends on how bad the issue is. Like, if we're talking a couple
of pages,
I'll give them the actual schema code as part of the audit. That's a given. So if it would, like, for example, if they don't have any person schema on the about page, or they don't have any of the specific schema for their specific industry pages, for example, I might create the code and validate it, make sure it validates, make sure they know exactly where it needs to go, and that's it. But if it's hundreds of pages, that is when we're talking about probably where that would get into an additional service type thing.
Right. And another question as well is I'm thinking to Kalicube Pro, so I'm kind of picking your brains to figure out how I need to go about this.
Absolutely.
Is that I explain to people, I give them the interface and I explain to them what they need to do, and then they mess it all up. And I actually need to go in and check everything. Do you do that with your SEO audits? Do you go in and say, right, and after we've done it and you've implemented, you go, that's done, and I come in and check it?
I think that so long as the client knows up front that specific checking and things like that could be an additional service, there shouldn't be an issue with that. But I kind of think that where some agencies run into a problem would be where if somehow nothing like that is mentioned and the client assumes that you're just going to do everything as part of the audit. You don't talk about implementation, you don't talk about checking, you don't talk about additional hours that may be required for fixing mistakes that they make. So it's really important to communicate upfront exactly what's going to be included as part of the audit. Usually that's done in the proposal phase. So you're talking to the client initially when you have a proposal, right? So you create the proposal, and in the proposal you would list only specific changes that are being made as part of initial checks will be included here. But if you want additional changes that are going to be taking hours upon hours upon hours later, then maybe you're going to want to include a line that says this kind of thing is offered as an additional service and depends on the specific client. And we can talk about that when we get to that point. So it's really a situation where you kind of have to feel out from client to client, but you still want to mention that in the proposal that you use anyway.
Right, yeah, it looks to me very much like I should have talked to you several years ago and done better proposals before I actually started doing the work. But that's a really, really, really good summary of kind of how to prepare to get to that audit stage, get the audit done, make sure the client understands it, make sure it's incredibly well presented so that they're encouraged to implement it. And as you said, make sure it's 100% clear what you are doing and what you aren't doing.
Yeah, and the client is not going to know everything you know. And I think sometimes that's also a mistake that agencies make, is that they don't, it's hard to understand exactly, unless you're in the industry on a day-to-day basis, especially if you're an agency that deals with multiple different industry clients, you want to make sure that, because some clients are going to be more well-versed in SEO, other clients are not. And usually that happens in the discovery phase. You find out exactly what they've been able to do, how they've been able to do it in the past, and what if any, the current level of SEO education actually is. So if the client is well versed in SEO, maybe you might want to, but you still want to keep some of that communication in there, because some clients are not well versed in SEO context.
Right. Yeah, no, and explaining but not over-explaining is incredibly important. And that's what I would call smart intelligence of somebody like yourself, is to say this client needs to know this but doesn't need to know that, because it will just confuse them and create problems further down the line. They're going to get lost. Brilliant. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. That was absolutely delightful. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We're going to now introduce next week, which is going to be Andrew Holland talking about the value of SEO. He's a really lovely chap. I've had a quick chat with him and he knows so much. He's so smart and he's so lovely, and it's going to be absolutely delightful. Could you pass the baton, please, Brian?
Absolutely. Andrew, you are, I've seen you on Twitter, Facebook, you're fantastic. And I know and really communicating the value of SEO is such an important part of the SEO process, and you'll do awesome. So here's me passing the baton on to you.
That was absolutely brilliant. I love the formal ending to that. Thank you so much, Brian. You get the outro song.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Anton. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you, Jason. So.
Oh, brilliant. Love it. I love it when the guests sing back. I never expect it. Thanks a lot,
I'm not actually singing. I'm kind of just doing my out of tune kind of thing, but what